Hoy le quiero hacer a usted una pregunta, porque es una pregunta que he escuchado mucho por todos lados. ¿Es o fue Jesús un socialista? La afirmación la he escuchado y nadie sabe decirme exactamente si realmente Jesús de Nazaret fue un socialista. Para hablar sobre este tema, yo quiero agradecer la presencia en este programa de Lawrence Reed. Él es el presidente emérito de la Fundación para la Educación Económica, FI, y autor de varios libros, entre ellos Real Heroes, Héroes Reales, y este libro que tengo aquí conmigo, que es precisamente esa pregunta. ¿Era Jesús un socialista? La conversación la vamos a hacer en inglés para que usted escuche directamente a Lawrence Reed. Thank you very much for this conversation. And you mentioned it at the beginning of the book that you've heard the question many times, or the affirmation, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ was a socialist. And it's actually said with profound certainty, as if, of course, everyone who says it is totally sure that Jesus was a socialist. Let me start by asking you, what is socialism?
Very good question, Sergio, because you cannot answer the question, was Jesus a socialist, if you have the wrong conception of what socialism was. It is not simply caring for people or sharing things with them or giving them things. I mean, there is more giving and sharing and caring in capitalism than there ever is under socialism. What makes socialism socialism is that it is the concentration of power for the purpose of achieving one or more objectives: the redistribution of wealth, or the government ownership of the means of production, or the central planning of an economy. That's what socialism is, and it's my argument that Jesus never expressed sympathy for any of those things.
Now, socialists claim that they do this because they want to help the poor. Do they help the poor?
No, they don't. Socialism has a terrible track record when it comes to helping the poor. The main thing that they do for the poor is to give them a lot more company. They create more poverty instead of alleviating it. Poverty is alleviated through two things. One is the investment in personal character, and the second is investment in economic productivity. And socialism tends to discourage both of those things.
We are told that Jesus told a rich man who approached him that what he should do with his life was to take every property and every possession that he had, sell. And he told him, you have to sell it and then distribute it to the poor. And this is claimed to be the argument, or one of the arguments for assuring that Jesus was a socialist. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it ignores the context. This is something that Jesus said to one man in particular. He never made it a commandment for all people of all time. And it was a commandment made of a man who wanted to be in Christ's inner circle. He wanted to have eternal life and to be a disciple of Jesus. And Jesus was testing him to see how deep his commitment really was. And the very fact that the man would not sell what he had to earn his eternal reward, it was a good sign that he really didn't mean it. And so Jesus then turned to another person and made the statement that it's as difficult for a camel to
go through the eye of the
eye of a needle as it is for a rich man to get to heaven. He wasn't anti-rich. He was just saying that riches bring temptation that people of not very solid character will allow to take them over. But keep your priorities in straight, and you can be as wealthy as your services to others demand.
I've heard claims of politicians mostly who say Jesus was a socialist because he was close to the poor. He gave a special regard to the poor. He wanted to help the poor. Is that being a socialist?
No, because there are lots of people under all kinds of economic systems that have the same feelings. What makes you a socialist is how you want to help the poor. If you want to do it through voluntary means, through productive creation of wealth, through sharing voluntarily, or through commerce and trade, that's one thing. But if you want to accomplish helping the poor through the force of government, that's quite something else. If Jesus came back to us today and spoke to a large audience, and let's suppose he said, well, you know that I said to care for the poor. Now, what have you done for the poor? And if you raised your hand and said, well, I voted for the politicians who said they would take care of that, I don't think he would be impressed. He would say, I didn't tell you to turn it over to the politicians. I said for you to do it.
Is there a difference between being a socialist and a communist?
There is a difference, but it's one of degree. A communist could be said to be a bit more extreme, perhaps a devoted follower of Karl Marx, who thinks that socialism is just a way station to a utopia in which everything is shared equally with everybody and government withers away. But it's more of a fantasy utopia society, unrealizable and unachievable and undesirable, I might add. Socialism you can implement in an earthly sense, but its track record is pretty miserable.
Is socialism necessarily a coercive way of administering wealth in a society?
I don't think it's, you can separate coercion from socialism. If it's voluntary, it's not socialism. If it's voluntary, you can do that under capitalism, which is supposed to be the opposite of socialism. What makes socialism what it is the fact that it's compulsory, it's mandatory. It doesn't let you say no thanks.
Is there a difference between National Socialism and socialism?
National Socialism, as practiced primarily by the fascist states of Europe, of Hitler and Mussolini, they had a peculiar focus on their particular nation states. And in Hitler's case, of course, it was not only nationalistic, it was also racist. But in terms of how they perceived that the economy should run, they really were peas in the same pod as the communists. They might leave private property in your hands on paper, but you had to do what the state told you. So the state effectively owned your property more than you did.
Some socialists tell us, take a look at Sweden, take a look at Finland, take a look at Denmark, at Norway. That's socialism that actually works. Are they socialist countries?
No. As a matter of fact, the Danish prime minister a few years ago famously at a news conference made it plain that the world should stop calling Denmark socialist. He said, we are a market economy. The claim that the Scandinavian countries are socialist really is 40 or 50 years out of date. They did have a fling with socialism after World War II, where they nationalized, they centralized, they built expansive welfare states. But that didn't work out. And so all of those states now in Scandinavia and Finland are much freer economies. They are among the freest in the world, the most capitalist in the world. They have fully globalized economies. They don't have nationwide imposed minimum wage laws. They have more school choice than we have in the United States. They don't nationalize industries. They're far freer than most of the world.
In the 1960s and 1970s, there was a movement among the clergy in Latin America. It was called the Theology of Liberation, although they were proposing not necessarily measures of liberation of the people, but measures to apply a Marxist system. What do you think about that?
Liberation theology, I think, was destructive from its very inception. It takes a political agenda and attempts to superimpose it on the teachings of Christ, and it does so in a way that grossly distorts what Christ was all about. He never advocated the forcible redistribution of wealth. He never said, concentrate power in the hands of politicians, let them run the economy, let them own the resources or the means of production in society. Those are Marxist ideas, but they're not ideas from Jesus Christ.
How important is freedom for Christianity? And I say this because you've mentioned a number of times that one of the things that distinguishes capitalism from socialism is the freedom that you have in capitalism. Even if you want to be generous, you do it out of your own free will. How important is free will in Christianity?
I think free will is one of the defining characteristics of humanity. Think of it. How did the Creator create us? He didn't make us a fleet of robots, pre-programmed, without the ability to decide anything on our own. He made us each free agents for the most part. He gave us considerable power of free will, and he made us different. Each and every one of us is unique. No two people have ever been the same who have ever lived on this earth. that suggests that to be fully you, to be fully who the Creator created you as, you have to be free. If somebody else is telling you at every turn what to do, what you can do, what you can't do, you're not living your life. That other person is living his life through you.
Many politicians and academics point fingers to capitalism and say, take a look at capitalism. We have inequality because of capitalism. We have poverty because of capitalism. And when you tell them, okay, but take a look at communism or socialism and at what happened in their societies, and they always tell you, well, that's not real socialism.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
That's a common refrain of socialists. They embrace socialism as it begins in some country, like Venezuela 20, 25 years ago. But then as soon as it flops, which is inevitable, then they say, oh, well, they didn't get it right. It wasn't socialism. I think at some point they have to be adult about this and realize that, no, this is the way socialism works out. It isn't just socialism that's gone bad in one place. It goes bad every place. And they just need to be adult about it and recognize that its own inherent flaws of the concentration of power in the hands of mortal human beings inevitably produces economic and spiritual disaster.
Marx used to say that there's an unavoidable progression of history towards a socialist and a communist state, where individuals are not really important, they're not really relevant. You have a book which is about heroes, real heroes. Let me ask you this question. It's more philosophical maybe, but I think it's important. Do people actually make a difference in history?
Well, I think individuals make huge differences, often unpredictable differences. Often they make impact and differences because of the character that they have built up inside them, either good or bad. Hopefully more people build up good character and lead to good things than the bad. But think of it, when Marx said that what he favored, socialism, was somehow inevitable, he was sort of playing the role of a palm reader or a tarot card reader. You know, if you sit down in front of somebody who puts a deck of cards in front of you and says, I can read the cards and this is the future and this is the system that will prevail, you would laugh them off. Well, that's what Karl Marx had no unique vision into the future. He had no crystal ball. Any other historian who might make such fantastical predictions, I think, would be dismissed. But because he's thought of as, oh, he was for the poor, he was against the rich, then somehow he had mystical powers to see the future. That's nonsense.
I don't know your personal history, but I assume you were born a Christian, but one has to make decisions every day. What makes you remain a Christian, and what makes you remain a believer in free enterprise, in what some people, in fact, Marx called it capitalism, although it's not necessarily the defining characteristic, but what makes you believe in freedom of economic freedom and freedom of enterprise?
I have not always been a Christian. I've had my moments when I dabbled with ideas of atheism, when I questioned, when I doubted. But I think that's perfectly normal, perfectly natural. I think God expected it of us. We are to ask questions. That's part of the use of the brain that he gave us, to figure things out, to use logic, to go from doubt to certainty. There always will be some uncertainty because of the nature of faith. God doesn't appear in front of us as a massive being every morning and tell us how to live our day. He gives us considerable sway.
It's not a burning bush.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And that's the nature of faith. But I have grown ever stronger in my faith with time, and its connection with freedom, I think, is powerful. Freedom is what God made us for.
Lawrence Reed, author of Was Jesus a Socialist? Thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Y a usted, amigo, que al vernos y escucharnos hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se lo olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.